In the marble courtyard of the Hagia Sophia, the morning of May 30th, 1453, a young woman named Eleni knelt on cold stone. She was 22 years old. Her hands were bound with silk rope, expensive silk, the kind she used to sell in her husband's shop just 3 days earlier. Now Ottoman officers stood above her, examining her teeth like they would a horse at market. One wrote numbers on parchment with careful strokes, her age, her physical condition, her estimated value in silver pieces. Somewhere behind her in the crowd of captives, Eleni could hear her daughter crying. She was only 4 years old. Eleni couldn't turn to look. An officer had warned her that movement without permission would be punished immediately. The officer studying her face said something in Turkish. Another officer laughed. They were discussing her beauty, her potential uses, her price. They spoke about her the way merchants discuss grain or livestock. 3 days ago, Eleni had been a merchant's wife. She had a home, a family, a future. Now she was inventory. This is what happened to 25,000 women in Constantinople within 48 hours. And what followed was worse than death. Before we dive deeper into what happened to Eleni and thousands like her, if brutal history like this matters to you, hit like and subscribe to Crown and Dagger. We tell the stories textbooks won't touch. Now back to Constantinople, May 1453. Here's what most people never realise about Ottoman conquest. When we think of medieval warfare, we imagine battles, swords clashing, sieges, soldiers fighting soldiers, victory and defeat measured in territory gained or lost. But for the Ottoman Empire, conquest wasn't just military, it was economic, it was systematic, and it targeted women specifically. For over 6 centuries, from 1299 to 1922, the Ottoman Empire controlled territories spanning 3 continents, from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Yemen, from North Africa to the Caucasus. We remember them for architectural marvels like the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia, for brilliant military tactics, for sultans who shaped the course of history. But there's another side to that expansion, a darker infrastructure built on the systematic capture, processing, and exploitation of women from conquered territories. This wasn't chaos or soldiers running wild after victory. This was policy, documented in Ottoman archives, regulated by military law, executed with bureaucratic efficiency. Within 48 hours of Constantinople's fall on May 29, 1453, approximately 50,000 people were captured by Ottoman forces. Roughly half were women and girls, 25,000 women. But they weren't simply prisoners of war. They were sorted into categories, assigned market values, prepared for specific destinations throughout the empire. Let me tell you what happened to them. What happened next in Constantinople was systematic and calculated. Women were immediately separated from men and children. Then the women themselves were divided into categories based on age, physical appearance, and perceived value. The sorting happened in public squares throughout the captured city, often deliberately staged in front of burning churches or demolished civic buildings to maximize psychological impact on both victims and any remaining population. The process was designed to be witnessed, families forced to watch, mothers seeing daughters assigned to different categories, knowing they would never see them again. The Ottomans understood that this psychological trauma would spread throughout other territories they planned to conquer. Fear became a weapon more effective than cannons. Contemporary accounts describe the efficiency of this categorization. The Byzantine chronicler Doukas, who survived Constantinople's fall, wrote about seeing Ottoman officers moving through crowds of captured women with the precision of merchants evaluating livestock at market. They would call out ages, assess physical condition, note any visible defects or valuable skills. Young women between roughly 15 and 30 years old comprised the most valuable category. Ottoman officers examined these women carefully, assessed their beauty, checked their teeth for health indicators, evaluated their physical condition, asked about skills. Could they read, play music, embroider, speak multiple languages? These women were the prizes. They would be kept as personal concubines by conquering officers, sold to wealthy Ottoman households, or reserved for the harem systems of provincial governors, military commanders, or the Sultan himself. In the slave markets that operated openly in Ottoman cities like Bursa, Ankara, and Istanbul, a young Greek or Serbian woman in good health would sell for between 20 and 30 silver pieces, sometimes more if she was exceptionally beautiful or possessed valuable skills like literacy or musical ability. Sometimes less if supply was particularly high after a major conquest. The prices weren't arbitrary. They were based on established market rates that fluctuated with supply and demand, exactly like grain or silk or any other commodity traded throughout the empire. Ottoman market officials maintained price records, tracked trends, adjusted valuations based on current conditions. Women between 30 and 45 years old were evaluated primarily for domestic service capacity. Could they cook, clean, manage a household, care for children? These women were less valuable than younger ones, but still worth transporting and selling. They would spend their lives as domestic servants in Ottoman households. Endless work, no freedom, no hope of anything better. Women over 45 faced immediate execution alongside elderly men. They had minimal economic value. They couldn't bear children. They would be difficult to transport over long distances. They consumed resources without offering corresponding returns. From the Ottoman perspective, they were burdens without benefit. The execution was efficient, quick, processed in groups. Perhaps the most psychologically devastating separations involved mothers and their children. Young children, especially infants, were often killed in front of their mothers. Not because the Ottomans were cruel to children specifically, but because killing a woman's baby before her eyes was the most effective way to break her psychologically, to demonstrate complete power, to eliminate any thought of resistance or escape, to make clear that everything she loved could be destroyed instantly if she didn't cooperate fully. Girls between roughly 8 and 14 were separated for different purposes. Some would be raised in Ottoman households, essentially adopted into families as servants who might eventually gain some small measure of status. Others were held in specialized facilities until they reached an age considered appropriate for harem service. The Ottoman system planned for the future. Today's child captives were tomorrow's concubines. The sorting process took hours, sometimes days, depending on the number of captives. But it was ruthlessly efficient. Ottoman administrators had refined these procedures over centuries of conquest across 3 continents. The Ottoman Empire maintained detailed records because these weren't spontaneous war crimes. They were planned economic activities requiring careful accounting. The economic infrastructure supporting this system stretched across the entire empire. Specialized markets in major cities had dedicated sections for human trafficking with established pricing structures. Bills of sale, transport receipts, and market inventories survive in Ottoman archives today, documenting human misery with the same bureaucratic precision applied to silk shipments and spice caravans. The Ottomans didn't invent slavery. Slavery had existed for thousands of years across virtually every civilization, but they industrialized it in ways previous empires had never achieved. They created standardized procedures for capture, transport, and sale that operated with corporate efficiency. Success in Ottoman military campaigns was measured not just in territory conquered, but in people captured. Commanders received financial bonuses and political advancement based on the number and quality of prisoners taken. This created powerful incentives for targeting civilian populations, rather than just military forces. The psychological impact on surviving populations was precisely what Ottoman strategists intended. Villages and cities that witnessed these procedures often surrendered without resistance when Ottoman armies appeared on the horizon next time. The empire's reputation for systematic brutality became a weapon more effective than any siege engine. But to understand what this system really meant for the women who survived the initial sorting, we need to follow one of them. Let me tell you about a girl named Anastasia. That wasn't the name in Ottoman records. They called her Aisha. She was 14 when Crimean Tatar raiders swept through her Ukrainian village in 1502. The raid happened at dawn. Anastasia was one of 200 villagers captured. They were tied with ropes and forced to march south for 3 weeks. Her mother collapsed on the second day. When Anastasia tried to help her, a Tatar rider struck her and told her to keep walking. She never saw her mother again. By the time they reached the border market, 40 prisoners had died. An Ottoman merchant examined Anastasia, checked her teeth, made her walk, paid 25 silver pieces. She was transported to Bursa, bathed, dressed in white linen, and taken to the slave market. A provincial governor purchased her for his harem. That night, they changed her name to Aisha. They told her she would convert to Islam and serve with absolute obedience. When she refused to renounce Christianity, they locked her in darkness for 3 days. No food, no water, no light. On the 4th day, she agreed to everything. The harem where Anastasia lived was a world of its own. High walls, guarded gates, beautiful courtyards that were also cages. She shared quarters with 17 other women, most captured like her from different regions. Greek women, Armenian women, Circassian women, all renamed, all converted, all property. The hierarchy was brutal. Senior concubines had power over newer ones. Those who pleased the governor received better food, better quarters, small privileges. Those who didn't face punishment, neglect, or worse. Anastasia learned quickly to be invisible when possible, compliant when necessary. She bore her first child at 16, a daughter. The governor's daughter, though the girl would never call her mother. Children born in harems belong to their fathers, not their mothers. She lived in that harem for 23 years. She bore 4 children total. None ever knew her real name was Anastasia. None knew she was born in Ukraine. None knew she was Christian before capture. She died at 37, still a slave, still property. Her body was placed in an unmarked grave. No ceremony, no acknowledgement. She simply disappeared. But Anastasia was one of millions. Or take Sofia, a Serbian girl from Belgrade. She was 17 when Ottoman forces conquered her city in 1521. She thought surrender meant mercy. She was wrong. Ottoman soldiers went house to house, identifying young women. Sofia's father tried to hide her in a cellar. A neighbour told the soldiers where she was. They dragged her out. Her father tried to stop them. An Ottoman officer struck him down with a sword, killing him in front of her. Her father's blood on the floor. Her mother screaming. That was her last memory of home. Sofia was taken with 40 other young women, transported to Istanbul over 6 weeks. 3 women died during transport. Their bodies were left by the roadside. In Istanbul, Sofia was sold to a wealthy merchant's household, not as a concubine, as a domestic servant. 19 years of cleaning, cooking, serving, never paid, never free, never allowed to leave. She tried to escape once at 23. She made it 3 streets before being caught. 20 lashes in front of the other servants. She never tried again. She died at 36 from an illness that went untreated because slaves weren't worth the expense of physicians.